Hey there, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we are going to talk about the various ways Irides change, and we're going to talk about why they change. Now, this might be a bit of a surprise to some of you who've got training that's a little bit old and outdated, but take a look at this and see what you can learn. I'd really love it if you would drop a comment below and if you'd like this video and even share it with a friend. Thanks so much.
Today we are talking about the changes that we can see in Irides. This is a slightly controversial topic, and it's one that there is a lot of conflicting information out there because there's a lot of people who are still teaching old, disproven information. So we're going to dive in hot and heavy. My name is Judith Kopp. So our information today is meant for your education only. It's not meant to diagnose or prescribe, and you are responsible for any results you get from using this information. Just before we dive in really quickly, the next cohort of dynamic iridology is starting on March 15th, and there is still time to enroll. In this course, as a level 3 IPA certified instructor, I teach constitutional iridology at a level that prepares my students to certify with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. And in this course, I draw on my 40 plus years of experience as an iridologist, master herbalist, and trained nutrition coach. We integrate a little bit of herbology and nutrition with this because no sense in knowing how to figure out where the strengths and weaknesses are if you don't know what to do about it, right? This course is based on the most up-to-date research that is available for iridology. You're going to learn more than just iris markings. We do a lot of work learning how the various markings work together and how to trace a symptom back to its genetic, dietary, and lifestyle roots. And then we learn how to create programs for our clients so that we learn how to do that really quickly so that we're not spending a lot of time on program creation. And the way I teach it, you learn how to create programs very succinctly to ensure client compliance and success. If you've already got a college level anatomy and physiology course under your belt, maybe you're an RN, an LPN, an ND, an MD, an LMT, a PT, or an EMT, maybe you're a herbalist or a trained nutrition coach or something else that has required you to have a separate anatomy and physiology course in your training, then you are eligible to speak with me about enrolling in the dynamic iridology course. I only teach people who have that anatomy and physiology under their belt already, because that allows us to go so much deeper with iridology. To find out if this course is a good fit for you and to learn about all of the details of the course, let's have a conversation. Use this link that you see on your screen, tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology-insight. I'm just patching that into the chat box. There we go. And you can schedule a time to speak with me about the course. And we can see if this is actually going to be a good fit for you. I accept only a maximum of 10 students per cohort because I believe that smaller groups enable better learning. So none of these 40 and 50 students per class where you never get time with the instructor and you never get your questions answered. So again, if you've got A and P under your belt and you're interested in learning more about the dynamic iridology course, use the link that I pasted into the chat box and schedule a time to speak with me. Now let's take a look at iridology and how things change. Now I want you to take a really close look at this first set of pictures. This was taken with an 8 megapixel camera that had an incandescent ring flash. Okay, so 8 megapixels. So when we say, can we get good photos with our smartphones? And we can get usable photos, but they're not great. Most of your smartphones are 10 to 15 megapixels. So they won't be great photos, not compared to what you're going to see today. I want you to look at what we see for detail in here. Look at how things are quite indistinct, right? This is the same person taken 18 months later with a 24 megapixel camera. What changes do you see between those two sets of photos? Now let's look at them side by side. If you were to compare these photos, what would you say is the difference here? I'm going to give you a minute to type something into the chat box because, you know, if you play with me, you're going to get more information. But if everybody's going to be quiet today, then we'll just keep this super high level, just really, 30,000 feet. Theodora says the lighting is different. Absolutely, the lighting is different. Theodora, how does the light affect the photo? Theodora is one of my course graduates, so she'd better have the right answers. Theodora, why is the light important? Anybody else, what do you see is different between these two photos? I want you to be thinking about what you see and what you think it means. It affects everything because the pupil is not clear. Yeah, the pupil isn't clear. We don't see the border of the pupil. What else do we see? If we're looking at the iris itself, how has that lighting affected what we see? Or what are the differences that you see? The fibers are not as apparent exactly in the left one. They're not quite as clear as they are in the right one. Excellent observation. The marks are not very clear. Yeah, even though this is in focus for 8 megapixel, it's not as distinct of a photo. Anybody notice the difference in color between the eyes? Yes? Okay, so tell me, what do you think that color difference means? One looks great. So what do you think it means if the one on the left is an older photo, the one on the right is a newer photo? What does it mean that the iris color is different? What do you think? Better camera pixels, Janine, you're way too smart. Nicely done. Nicely done. I see a lot of photos like this out there on the internet. And they look at this one, and then they look at one like this, then they look at one like this, and they will say the person has obviously done some cleansing. They've obviously made their eye brighter by doing some cleansing, improving their nutrition, taking this expensive herbal program, doing an all-fruit diet. Nothing could be further from the truth. Absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. As has been pointed out, the light makes a different makes a difference. Yellow incandescent versus blue LED. That's going to affect the color we see. The megapixels, 8 megapixels versus 24, is going to give us better definition on the newer picture. Flora says the stages from acute to chronic cannot be determined because one is more dull versus one seems more acute. So Flora, that's a really good observation. I want to underscore that in modern iridology, acute and chronic do not exist. That old idea that if we see a darker, deeper shading in an eye, especially in a gap between fibers, meant that it was chronic, degenerative, that could be reversed, has been totally disproved. All right. So we need to be very aware about the photographic qualities, right? The photographic qualities make all the difference in the world. And we need to make sure that the camera is the same camera, that the lighting is the same lighting, that the camera is set on the same technical settings. So for shutter speed, for f-stop, those kinds of things. And if we're using a battery to run the flash on the camera, those batteries have to be fresh, right? They can't be batteries that have been sitting in the camera for 6 months because that's going to give us a weaker flash. So this is so, so important. We cannot use photos to determine the effectiveness of a program because the Irides are genetically set. The Irides themselves will not change based on herbal programs or dietary work. And I urge you, when you see, I'm going to lose my voice today, I think, just so I can't yell at anybody. No, I'm just kidding. When you see photos that say before and after, and there's a dramatic color change, always look at, is the lighting the same? Was it controlled? Always look at, does it look like this was taken with the same camera? Even the skin tones, even the color of the sclera are different. And that's a dead giveaway that these are different cameras, which means we couldn't use these for before and after if we wanted to. And so we always want to consider the camera. Better question to ask here is not can we do before and after studies, but what changes do we see in Irides and what do those changes mean? So Flora, I love that you did your course in 1994. This is probably going to be a radical shift for you as you see what we're talking about today. What we know about pigment, I apologize for my voice today. What we know about pigment is that it can accumulate, but it does not disperse. It builds with time. Now, people would say, but isn't that toxic influence? No, it's genetic cueing. My hair has not always been gray. Right? As my hair is getting grayer every day, it seems. I attribute that to having 7 children, just saying. But my hair has not always been gray. And it's interesting to note that my hair actually did some radical natural color shifts. Before I had my first child, my hair was extremely blonde. After my first child, my hair went darker. My hair stayed darker until I hit my mid-50s, and then a little gray started filtering in. All of that was genetic cueing. So when we talk about pigment building in an eye, what we are seeing is that pigment may become acquired or it may become more dense. So let's look at a set of eyes. So this is the same person, not the person we just looked at, but these eyes belong to one individual. These photos were taken about 25 years apart. This was an incandescent flash and a print film camera. This was my first LED 24 megapixel. We know these eyes are the same. We can find landmarks. We have lacuna here, just inside the collarette. We've got lacuna here at about, 22 minutes, just inside the collarette. You'll notice the pupil is a dramatically different size. This incandescent light was not nearly as bright as this LED light. So the bright light constricts the pupil, right? The smaller pupil is not a sign of healing. It is a reaction to the light. So we've got a pupillary size difference, which is going to make all of these markers that we see in here, all of these lacuna, are going to go from being fat because this iris tissue is very condensed or compressed to being long and thin as the iris tissue gets stretched out because the pupil is smaller. All right, so as we look at that, now what I want to look at is this pigment that is sitting between 30 minutes and about 42 minutes in zone 3. The original photo that was taken many decades ago does not show any pigment there. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that over time, this client has a genetic thing that is building, that has been triggered on. We understand epigenetics, that we can turn things on and off. But this client has turned on some genes, specifically genes that are about liver function and how the liver affects all of the organs sitting in these reaction fields right here. And indeed, as we look at this person's health and his symptoms, he is developing liver symptoms as he ages. He's now 68. These photos were done when he was 63. And in the ensuing years, from approximately the age of 50 to 63, we've tracked some liver symptoms that have developed and that we are constantly trying to get on top of. Here we have the eyes of another client. These photos were also taken about 20 years apart. These were taken when this one on the left was taken when he was a teenager. The one on the right was taken when he was in his early 30s. He's now mid-30s. So these are about 20 years apart again, 20, 22 years apart. I want you to look carefully. Let's make sure these are the same person. Is there anything in here that would be an identifying marker? We have a particular fiber, a transversal here on this lateral, lower lateral side of the iris. We see that transversal right here. We see another transversal here at about the 40-minute mark. And we see that transversal here. Now I want you to look really carefully at this transversal. We do not have a brown pigment sitting just inside, just tucked into it, but notice on the newer one we do. So what does this tell us? Again, it tells us that over these years, this fellow has had a liver something in his liver physiology is triggering, and your liver does 500 different jobs, right? So we're not sure which of those jobs is being triggered here. And when we look at where this is sitting in his eye, this is sitting, the good iridologist should always have a map at hand, right? There we go. So this is sitting roughly in the bladder area. So we've got the transversal that's been there all along, which suggests bladder. The brown is suggesting that in the last 20 years, at some point in time, the liver has triggered and it now wants to affect the bladder. Trina says it appears there are more dark brown spots in the later image. Absolutely, Trina. Good observation. We have more of these brown pigments. We've got more pigment has built in the last 20 years, not just this one. This is just the most obvious one. So we know that liver is genetically cued and is triggering things. And so we watch to see, what does this mean? This does not mean he has become more toxic. In truth, after we did these photos, he, being a young adolescent or mid-adolescent at this time, he did get into some pretty crappy things as a young adult. And then he straightened himself out beautifully. And he actually became a chef, which he did for a few years. And his specialty in his private catering business was to do small dinner parties of 8 to 10 people that focused on local organic produce. And that is how he changed his life, to going local, mostly organic, all fresh. And so he's really done an about face with his nutrition. Genetically, though, these other things were cued. They may have been as a result of his riotous living as a young adult, but not likely. These are more simply genetics that at a certain point in time, just as my hair started to go gray, his liver started to say, yeah, you need to love me a little bit more. We may see a white ring form in the cornea. This is not actually in the iris, this is in the cornea. This white ring is known as the lipemic diathesis. Those of you who may have older iridology training will have called this an arcus senilis or a sodium cholesterol ring. You would have said it absolutely means the person is blocking arteries. We know that's not necessarily true now. It is true in some cases, but not in all cases. And so we may see this develop over time because of the genetic functioning primarily of the liver and how the liver manages carbs, and whether it's turning them into good cholesterol or whether it's turning them into fat deposits, or whether it's messing with the blood sugar balance. So we need to ask some questions to understand what this is all about. So with age, this lipemic diathesis may begin to appear. It often starts out as just a sliver along the edge of the eye. And with time, it can become thicker. It can expand to go all the way around the eye. And again, this is not telling us this person has blocked arteries. It's telling us we need to watch their liver, telling us we need to check their blood sugar balance. We should probably check triglycerides and cholesterol to be safe, but we need to understand that this is primarily a liver indicator. Again, liver has been triggered. We might see the pupil change shape. Now, this is quite debatable. When I first learned iridology, we didn't even pay any attention to the pupil. And then we got into that there are genetic influences that affect the shape of the pupil, whether it's got flattenings, whether it's elongated, what have you. And now we're starting to do research that is saying genetic influences, but also some very dynamic influences, and that the pupil shape correlates strongly to spinal alignment and to nerve feed in the body. When we see flattenings, it suggests long-standing spinal subluxations. And so while there may be genetic influences, if we see these really early on in life, it might be genetic. There may also be situational influences. For example, if you've got a young child who plays soccer and they're doing, they're to that age where they can actually have a little, there might be some contact, or maybe they play hockey or a football. And again, there's body contact. They may have had some injuries that have not been properly addressed. And as that is long-standing, we see the pupil develops flattenings. When we see pupil flattenings, we know we need to do spinal alignment work. And that might include physical work, having manipulations done, whether it's Dorn or chiropractic or a TRE or whatever we're going to do there. We probably need to do some emotional work, and we might need to use some supplements as well. So with time and with the right work, this may be able to become round again, but it takes a lot of focused effort to achieve that. What we do see more commonly is sclera changes. The sclera is very, very dynamic. Where the iris shows us genetic potentials, the sclera shows us what's going on now. So as we look at this sclera, we've seen this fellow before with the brown pigment that he acquired. And these photos were approximately 20 years apart. I want you to look right up in this upper corner and notice that we have right here, if any of you are Harry Potter fans, we've got a bit of a Harry Potter scar starting, if you will. Notice how over the years it has become longer. Notice how this blood vessel that is coming across it has also changed some, right? It's actually gotten lighter as it's right there. And so this, we have a whole map for the sclera, and this is telling us what is dynamically going on in the body now. And so what this means is where the iris can accumulate markings slowly over time, usually slowly over time, the sclera can actually change fairly quickly. And so this is why we want to do iris photos annually, not so much to see, somewhat to see what's happening in the iris, but very much to see what's going on in the sclera. As we understand what's going on in the sclera and we see these markings and we correlate it and cross-check it against genetic predispositions of the iris, we are so much more able to create those succinct programs for our clients that will help them to actually move their health forward. Okay, we're never doing a program to try to dissolve markings in the iris, because that's not going to happen. But we are doing programs to help us alter what we see in the sclera to calm things down, like if putting him on a program of oral chelation would be wise, because this is suggesting some significant arterial or circulatory blockages, again, coming into the liver zone. So anything we can do to open up the circulation in the liver would be a really good idea for this gentleman. What are you thinking here? What are your questions? What are you wondering? What are your observations as we're looking at these images and talking about how changes can happen? What are you seeing here? Some things that we know do not change. I was taught that when we saw an area like this, which you might have been trained to call this a lesion, we call them lacunae. When we've got more than one, it's lacunae, one is a lacuna. We were taught that when there's fiber inside that, it means healing is happening. We now know that is not true. We now know that the eye is made up of layers of fiber, and when we have an opening in the top layer of fiber, We are simply looking at what the fiber is in the next layer down. Okay, and so this is not healing. It is a genetic mark that is passed down that shows us where there may be a familial weak link that we need to be aware of. Now, some of you have been with me for a while. Some of you are new to the process and new to the constitutional style. What are you hearing here, especially if you haven't been exposed to constitutional before? What are you hearing here that is different from what you've heard elsewhere? This is probably the safest place to share that kind of information so we can make sure you're up to speed, right? When we look at irides, again, same iris, these two photos taken on the same day back to back, this one taken about 1.5 years later with a different camera with different lighting. I was originally taught that as a person heals, the lacunae would change, that they would get smaller, that they would go away. And I was originally taught that looking at from the image to the left to the image on the right, that this was a smaller lacuna this person was healing. There was no recognition that pupil size affects how the lacunae appear. And it's not that we're actually changing the fiber structure. What we are seeing here is simply that as the iris tissue is stretched out, things migrate a little bit, but it's not because they're actually migrating. It's just the action of the push and the pull, right? And so this is so important. Janine is saying lighting definitely affects everything. Oh, it does so much. I get hate messages. Can you believe hate messages about iridology from people who've been trained in such a way that they are taught that these are valid before and after, that this shows distinct healing. They've even sent me pictures that were clearly not the same person and said before and after, look at the healing. No understanding of technology here to understand how lighting affects everything. So again, the fibers don't actually move. Think of this lacuna. Think of this lacuna as a balloon. Just because the shape is slightly modified doesn't change the volume of that balloon. We still have the same volume. We still have the same volume. That's how we know things have not, that this is not a healing indicator, right? Trina says, so sad that people send hate messages. That's the world we live in. People can take pot shots, right? Where I stand is I know that what I've got is the correct information, and I know that they have got blinders on and are not looking at anything new, right? But with fake pictures, yeah, absolutely, right? Trying to justify their perspective with bad data. That does not make them look any better. I was taught constitution does not change and that you are born with constitution. However, lacuna would be lessened, though not fully gone. That was 1994. And again, I've not been updated as I am not in the industry any longer. There you go. So you're right. Constitution does not change. Lacunae do not change either. They are passed down genetically. So if I've inherited a lacuna, it's staying that way. If I did good things for my health before I had children, I may be able to pass on a stronger genetic structure, and they may not have that lacuna, or that lacuna might not be a part of their genetic structure at all. Okay, so can we see, so when we look at this, again, we need to ask, can we actually see and monitor health improvements through the irides? The answer is no, right? Because the fibers don't move and pigment accumulates, it doesn't dissolve. That was one of the things that made me look at constitutional iridology. I was trained originally as Jensenian, and we were taught that doing the right cleanses, doing these intense fasts and all these right herbs would help us get rid of pigment. That pigment meant we were toxic, and that lacunae meant we were unwell, that there were problems. And so we would do these cleanses, we would do these high-powered programs. Pigment never disappeared. Lacunae didn't change. And that's what made me just about leave iridology. And then I learned constitutional. And it was like, holy doodle, does this ever make sense? Right? It just made so much sense. So if the irides don't change, then why do we bother doing iridology? If we don't, what's your feeling on this? If I look at an iris and I create a herbal program, a lifestyle program, a dietary program, and a year later, the irides haven't changed, why should I bother doing iridology? What is the value of doing iridology? Yeah, Flora's saying that's the most important question. What is the value of it? And I want to give you a chance to get those answers in, because I think we've got a really smart group here. Janine says to guide them in a better lifestyle. That is brilliant. Trina says you can help people find out where their weaknesses are so they can build up those symptoms. Absolutely. The ultimate end result of all of that, the better lifestyle, understanding where their weaknesses are so they can build those systems rather, is ultimately to help them improve their health and have control of their health. It's not about changing their eye color, right? Flora says, even if you cannot change the constitution, you can see the weaknesses and work within all of it to help them develop an amazing program and lifestyle. Absolutely, Flora. Yes, that is absolutely the purpose we do this. That's why we do this. It's not to change their eye color. You want to change your eye color, go get colored contacts, right? It's to improve their health. It's to help us understand how they're put together so that we understand what their symptoms are, what their genetic potential is, what does that mean they need to do to maximize their health and to feel the very best they can for as long as they can. It's to give them, it's to empower them, it's to give them control. So can we see potential health problems arising? Yeah, we can. If we see pigment becoming obvious in the eye, if we see changes in the sclera, we can often see that things are starting to brew, and we can sometimes get the jump on it without even knowing where it's going. But we don't do iridology to change the eye color. That's a fallacy. And I will guarantee if I was to line up all of my clients and ask them, would they rather change their eye color or have improved health? Every one of them would say, I would rather have improved health, right? And Fiona's saying when she studied iridology, we learned nothing about the sclera. Yeah, because, 30, 40 years ago, sclerology was in its infancy and it wasn't receiving the credit it deserves. Now, the sclerology component is a part of the iridology course, and it's required for certification as an iridologist with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. Because we're looking not just at the genetic potential, we want to look at the current, what's going on, and understand how the genes and the current situation work together so that we can create the most powerful program. Would love to learn about the sclera. Yeah, well, it's built right into the program now, built right in. All right, so we've arrived at the point where we know that iridology is not about changing eye color. It's not about diagnosing disease processes. It's about understanding how the body works. This is why I require anatomy and physiology of all of my students before they come into my program, because they need to have that foundation of how the body works. I'm going to take their understanding even deeper, and then we're going to learn how to assess the eyes, what questions we need to ask the client, how we put that together with their symptoms so that we can create step-by-step doable programs. I have nurses and physiotherapists and radiologists. I've got all kinds of health professionals coming into my program. They have an amazing background in anatomy and physiology, and every one of them is saying, wow, we thought we knew the body. Now that we've added iridology and we understand more those intricate links between organs, we really know the body. And it's so exciting to hear these well-trained professionals acknowledge and recognize how much more they've learned about how the body works by learning iridology. So again, the next course is starting on March 15th. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details right now. If you've got anatomy and physiology under your belt, if you want to learn iridology and sclerology at a professional level to use in a clinical setting, that means this is way more than a weekend workshop, folks. If that's what you are looking for in an iridology program, then use the link. I'm going to post it in the chat again. Use this link and schedule a time to speak with me over a Zoom meeting. I only allow people to register for the course if I've actually spoken with them. I need to know who they are. I need to know their background. And I need to know that we play well in the sandbox together, right? We need that good chemistry. And you know, if the program's a good fit for you, I will invite you to enroll. If it's not, I will coach you in another direction. All righty. What questions do you have about this? What comments, what observations have you gathered from this little, very high level look at how the Irides do and don't change? What was your aha moment today? I know there's about a 15-second delay in messages coming through over the chat. So we're just going to give that a few seconds for anyone to weigh in on their aha moment, what they learned. What was of value in this last 40 minutes for you? The way we can help our clients without telling them that the iris will change. Yeah. Lacey says, I'm brand new to iridology, so all of it was valuable to me. Lacey, so glad you joined us today. Thank you for being here. Flora said, I had questions about eye color changes outside of any photography and missed the first part of your Zoom. And based on what you said you mentioned eye color. My second child was born with deep blue eyes, and just after I stopped breastfeeding, her color is green hazel. What can be learned from these changes, and do they relate to her health in your opinion? All babies are born with dark eyes. The color settles within the first 6 months or so, and the irides continue to mature most rapidly over the first 6 to 8 years. And so, yes, where her eyes are at now, assuming she is more than about a year old, her eyes are now giving you information about her genetic potential. Janine says, by the way, congratulations on being the teacher of the year with IVA. Thank you, Janine. That was absolutely a surprise for me. I had no idea that the board of directors had chosen me for this year. So it was an honor. Thank you for that. Laura says she's 18. Yeah, so her eyes are fully mature. And as I won't say fully mature because the irides continue to mature right until we die. Right. And that's why pigment surfaces over the years. And so, yeah, her eyes will give you a volume of information if you know what you're looking for and if you know what questions to ask. And so, Flora, because you've registered for the webinar, you will receive the replay. So you will be able to go back and watch the beginning of this again. Fantastic. So great to see your comments here. Thank you so much for that. And I look forward to, if you're not already in the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System group on Facebook, feel free to ask to join. And you'll have to answer some qualifying questions in order to get in, because again, I do vet people in the group to make sure that we've got the right kinds of people coming in. And if you are looking for an excellent iridology program with a teacher who cares, which is why I was voted Teacher of the Year, right, this year. And that just happened on this past weekend, so it's very fresh for me. Then feel free to use that link and let's talk. Let's talk about getting you into the program, see if it's a good fit. Fantastic, everyone. Thank you so very much for being with me today. I really appreciate it, and we will see you again soon.
How was that? I'd love it if you would take just a moment to subscribe to my channel. It just helps make the videos more visible to more people. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Bye for now.